Hey everyone, welcome to Trail Therapy. My name is Colt. Today, we're gonna put a lift kit on my 2023 GMC Canyon, and I'm hoping this solves a couple issues. One, if you saw the previous video, we put 34s on this truck and they rub pretty good. So I'm hoping that solves that issue. But I also wanna talk about what the lift kit does to the ride quality, what it does to the gas mileage, what the tires and the lift kit do to the gas mileage. And I also want to talk about some other issues that I'm having with the truck and with these tires. So stay tuned to the end of the video where we talk about that. Now, if you're new here to Trail Therapy, thank you for stopping by for a video, and consider subscribing if you're into this sort of thing on this channel. We go over everything outdoor related, vehicle mods and builds for overlanding, camping, gear. I'm an avid landscape photographer, so we'll go over some photography stuff as well. Don't forget to subscribe if you're into that sort of stuff. All right, let's get to work. Okay, so in the box, we got a little thank you card. That's pretty cool. We've got a koozie, we've got a sticker, we've got an air freshener. Hell yeah. Okay, then we get to the spacers. These are the spacers, solid aluminum that go above the strut. So we've got two of those. I like how these are black. I really like how these are black because a lot of the other companies that do this, they're not black. Then we've got our preload spacers here that go under the strut. And then we've got the nuts, replacement nuts to go on top of the strut. And then we've got two shackles for the back. And this is going to give us our 1-inch lift in the back with 2 inches in the front. Now, I know there's probably going to be some people that are like, oh, you shouldn't use spacer kits and you shouldn't use shackles and whatever. I don't care. I really don't. Eventually, this truck will get a fully upgraded suspension. At least that's on the roadmap for this truck. But I just don't really care. I've seen plenty of people running kits just like this, and they seem to have no issues whatsoever. So, and if an issue arises, I'll be documenting it here on the channel, and we'll handle it. But anyway, just a subtle kit. I just want this truck to sit level, first of all, and I want just a little bit more ground clearance. So 1 inch in the back, 2 inches in the front. That's the perfect kit for me. Let's see how this goes and how long it takes. So in a previous video, we put the 34s on the Canyon, and I'm sure most of you watching this will have seen that video by now, and there was quite a bit of rubbing. So today we're gonna see if we can fix all of this rubbing with this lift level kit. But putting these 34s on gave us an extra 1 inch of suspension travel, of ground clearance, I'm sorry. So to the rear differential, we're now 10.5 inches, and to the lowest point in the front, we are 10.5 inches. So we're gonna measure this because I wanna see exactly how much extra ground clearance we get with this lift kit and exactly how much taller it sits. So let's do some measurements. Okay, so we're 18.5 inches to the bottom of the hitch, 16.25 inches to the bottom of the running boards, and we are 14.25 inches from the bottom of the gray spoiler, the lip under the tow hooks. So that's where we'll measure again when all this is done. I guess I should also measure the wheel wells, 39 inches and 37.25 inches on the front. Now, this lift kit from Level Up Suspension actually came with really good directions, pictures and everything. And I'll also put a link in the description below for this lift kit itself. But once you figure it out, once I did the first side, it wasn't that bad. You undo the tie rod, then you unbolt the upper control arm, and you unbolt the sway bar mount, and then you unclip some of the wiring. And then the hardest part of getting it out is absolutely getting the bolts out of the top of the strut, because they are really hard to reach, and you absolutely have to have a ratcheting wrench in order to have any shot of doing this. And even with a ratcheting wrench, it took a long time. But getting the strut out of the truck was actually one of the easiest parts. Putting the spacer on top of the strut was no big deal at all. And as a matter of fact, if you just wanted to do a 1-inch level kit on this truck, this is all you'd have to do. And honestly, it would be pretty easy, I think, because that was by far the easiest part of this whole process. Now, from Level Up Suspension, you can buy a 1-inch level kit, a 2-inch level kit, or a 2-inch in the front and a 1-inch in the back lift kit, which is what I got. So I've never used spring compressors before in my life, and that was a bit nerve-wracking because we've all seen the viral videos where they didn't do it right and it goes shooting across the room through their garage door. So on the first try of using the spring compressors, it felt too weird and I didn't have them lined up. You definitely have to line them up, the spring compressors, exactly on opposite sides of the spring in order to have any shot of this working. Also, make sure you get a paint pen, a paint marker, and mark the alignment from the top of the strut all the way through the bottom, so that way you've got the actual strut, the shock itself, with the, I don't know what you call them actually, the hats, I guess, or the brackets that hold the actual spring and the spring orientation. So that way, because if you don't line all this back up, then it's a real pain and it does not go back on the truck. So this is really important. Now, once I finally got it compressed enough, it was really hard to actually get the nut out of the top of the actual shock to get it out. And the only way that I could do this, because it was spinning inside the shock, the only way this worked is with an air impact driver or an impact driver of any kind. That gave me enough impact, I guess, so that way it would actually spin the nut loose, even though it was spinning inside of the shock. So far you absolutely need ratcheting wrenches and you absolutely need an impact driver, in my opinion. And you absolutely need spring compressors for sure. Now, once you got the spring compressed far enough to actually get it apart, then it was super easy. You just beat the old bracket off with a hammer, you put the new preload spacer around the shock, and you put the bracket back on, put the spring back on, and then use the impact driver to tighten it all back down. Now, I did have to use the spring compressors to compress the spring harder once it was all apart, because that preload spacer is about 1.5 inches or maybe 2 inches long, and so you have to compress the spring even harder to get it back together than you did to take it apart. Overall, this is on par for the hardest part of the process, but the real hard part is what's coming up, and that is putting that strut back in now that it's several inches longer. Maybe it's not several inches, but it's a lot longer. So what I did is I put the strut in there and I got all the nuts on top of the strut started so that way it wouldn't fall out, and then you just gotta push. You gotta find the right combination of turning like the spindle and getting everything turned and then putting all your weight down on the lower control arm to try to make enough space, and then you gotta do all that while pushing the strut in till the holes line up, and then get a bolt started. That was difficult. The first time it was really difficult because I still don't know what I'm doing, but I didn't really know what I was doing, and it took a long time. This was by far the hardest physical part of the whole thing. Again, if you were just doing the 1-inch kit, I think this would have been super easy, honestly, because you wouldn't have had to take the strut apart, but I really wanted this truck level. It's one of the things that's bugged me since the moment I picked it up, and I did want to get all the extra clearance to hopefully not have the rubbing issue that I had on these tires. Now, in all fairness, I was filming all of this, and that takes so much more effort, and if you're doing a good job at filming stuff. I run a couple other much bigger YouTube channels than this one, and so I have a lot of experience filming stuff and making sure that the camera angles look good. And one of the very hardest things about filming yourself doing actual work is not getting your body in the way of the camera. So everything that I was doing was trying to position my body and my arms and my hands so that way you guys could still see what was happening while I was getting the job done. And that is a compromised body position to be in the whole time. So it would have been significantly easier if I wasn't trying to film all this. Now I want to take a quick second to talk about the ride quality with the front done and the back not done. And this was a little surprising to me. It definitely rode way rougher, like a lot rougher, with the 2-inch on the front and none on the rear. And this made me a little bit nervous because I was like, is this just what it's gonna ride like? Because this is too rough. It was too bouncy and too rough. And that preload spacer, I'm guessing this is what the issue is. When you put the preload spacer in the strut, it is effectively kind of like increasing your spring rate. So it just felt like all the small bumps felt very immediate, and you felt like this truck in stock form, the ride was the first like half inch of travel, or maybe even full inch of travel, was very, very soft in my opinion. And so this took all of that away. Now this ended up sorting itself out, which I'll explain in a bit when I talk about the overall ride quality, but it was very alarming. It was really tight side to side. There was zero body roll, and the bumps with the 2-inch in the front and the stock ride height in the back. It was interesting. It's not the ride quality for me personally. Okay, day 2. My hands are super beat up, and I ran out of time. I got the front sides on yesterday, but did run out of time because I had to go pick my daughter up from school, and also filming everything it just takes a lot longer to film stuff than to just actually do it. But the fronts went on, took about 3.5 hours for side 1, and took somewhere around maybe 2 hours for side 2. I think of course, like with all things, if I was doing this again, I could probably get it done in an hour or an hour and a half per side, now that I actually know what I'm doing. Of course, any of you watching, it's probably going to be your first time and maybe your last time doing this. So filming everything, maybe things would have been faster if I wasn't filming, but ran out of time. So for anyone wondering, if you just do the 2-inch lift on the front and you do nothing on the back, if you're measuring from the top of the tire to the bottom of the fender, the front sits 3/4 of an inch taller than the rear when you're measuring that gap right there. And so it is squatted right now, which I am not a fan of, but I did drive it around yesterday, just blinding everyone with my headlights. So I got to figure out how to adjust the headlights as well. But we're going to get the shackles done today. And I also bought some hub-centric rings because I've been having some vibration, especially in the back. So we're going to put those on as well. Let's get this done. Now, unfortunately, I drove it around like this for 3 or 4 days before I had time to work on the rear again. And even my first day in the rear, I began working on the rear, and I am very impressed with how much suspension travel this truck has, because I didn't really stop to think about how far I'd have to jack the rear end up in order to get the tires off, because I'm used to jacking it up under the strut support on the axle. And so jacking it up on the frame in the back, this truck has a lot of suspension travel, and it was hard to get the tire off of the ground. Once I finally did figure out how to do it with 2 jacks, I had to use some blocks and use a jack on the frame right in front of the rear tire, and then another jack with some blocks under the axle, so that way I could independently control the height of the truck and the amount of pressure that was on the leaf spring, so we could get that bolt out of the shackle. But once I got that figured out, which took some doing, I realized that I had to drop the spare tire in order to get the bolt out of the shackle for the leaf spring. And unfortunately, by this time, I'm starting to run out of time again for the day. And so I just put the tire back on and tried it again the next day, in which case I started by dropping the spare tire. And the spare tire is easy enough to drop. I just hadn't done it yet on this truck, and I was pushing it time-wise. So dropped the spare tire, did the 2-jack method again, and this time it went pretty easy, honestly. It's a little intimidating. Again, I've never had these components apart before on a truck. It was a little intimidating pulling the bolt out, but really you just jack the truck up and then use the jack under the axle and take the nut off of the bolt holding the shackle. And once you get the height of the axle so you can spin the bolt in the shackle, when you pull it out, nothing's gonna happen. It's gonna stay right there. Now on one side, putting it back together, I did actually have an issue with the spring, the leaf spring being slightly twisted. The holes on both sides of the leaf spring wouldn't line up. And so what I ended up doing was grabbing a pipe wrench with a cloth and just putting the pipe wrench around the leaf spring and pulling it so I was twisting it to line up with the shackle. I don't know why it was like this. It was like this as soon as I unbolted it out of the original shackle. But this worked, and the other side went even easier. And this was by far the easiest part of the whole thing. If you have 2 jacks and once you get them lined up, this was honestly pretty easy. All right, so before we get into ride quality, gas mileage, and these other issues that I'm having, and along with the additional ground clearance that I want to tell you about, let's take a look at the truck the way that it sits now. Here we go. Okay, lift kit is on. Let's measure the, hopefully you can even hear this because it is so windy. Lift kit is on, gonna measure the ground clearance difference. So to the hitch is 19 3/4. To the running boards is 18 1/4 inches. And to the lip under the tow hooks is 17 inches even. So that's a difference of this right here. I don't even remember what the original was, but here's what the difference is. Okay, let's talk about the ride quality first. I was nervous going into this because I had the 2 inches on the front first with the stock height on the back. I was like, this is probably bumpier than I really wanted. Surprisingly, and it makes sense now that I think about it, once you get the back on, it made a big difference. If the truck is slightly squatted, there's a lot less weight on the front end than if it's level. And I don't know what kind of poundage we're talking here, but the weight distribution is certainly off on a squatted truck. And so it definitely rode significantly better as soon as I put the rear on. However, it was the immediacy of the small bumps. You still felt a lot more of it than it did stock. What I'm pleased to announce is I've either gotten used to it or it's gotten softer, and I think it's probably both because now I've put 500-600 miles on the truck with the full lift kit on, and it rides fine. I mean, it might be a little bumpier. That immediacy of the small bumps might be a little bit more than stock. The big bumps seem to be fine, and like big, like swooping, like gullies or whatever seems totally fine on the road. Pulling out of my driveway, dropping off the curbs seems totally fine. So I've probably gotten used to it, but I also think it's softened up a little bit since I've put it on, which is interesting. Now, gas mileage. I had a bunch of people ask in the previous video about putting 34s on this truck, what it did to my gas mileage. I lost somewhere around 1.5, maybe pushing up to 2 miles a gallon with these tires. Now they are 30 pounds, almost 30 pounds heavier per tire and wheel than the stock wheels and tires. So that didn't surprise me. Lift kit's been on for about 500 miles now, and I lost like another 1 gallon a mile, maybe pushing up to 1.5 gallons a mile if I'm doing a lot of high-speed interstate driving. So I've lost somewhere in the range of 3 to 4 miles per gallon with this whole thing. And you know what? That seems fine to me. Like I'm not really bothered by that. If you're worried about gas mileage, don't put bigger tires and wheels, and don't put a lift kit on your truck. I also had some people ask what I thought about the gearing. Now my speedometer, if I'm cruising at 75 on the speedometer, it says when I'm using Waze, it says that I'm going 79 miles an hour. So it's a big enough difference that I have to be conscious of it when I'm driving on the interstate, but it's not a big enough difference that I really feel the need to re-gear or anything. We'll see once I start pulling a trailer, once I start doing some actual off-roading. I don't think I need a re-gear, and I don't think it's really an issue at all. The engine in this truck has 310 horsepower and 430 foot-pounds of torque right from the factory. I can feel the bigger tires and wheels, but I'm never flooring the truck anyway, so it has not been an issue to me. I've never been in a situation yet where I felt like, oh, this is not fast enough, I need more power. I've not felt that with this truck. Now, if I was driving a lower powered truck, I probably would feel that way. Okay, now the issue that I'm having with these tires, there has been some vibration since the moment I put these wheels and tires on this truck. To be honest with you, it's been a pretty frustrating ordeal. As you guys saw in the last video, I went to Discount Tire because none of the local tire shops had time in their schedule for me. Go to Discount Tire. They said everything was fine, and I took off and I hop on the interstate, and it was like vibration city. I was like, this is not okay. I cannot drive 70 miles an hour. Take it back to Discount Tire the next day. They rebalance everything. I take it back, and I was like, this is better, but it's still like wrong. It's not okay yet. Take it back to Discount Tire a third time and was like, hey, this needs solved. This is not drivable. So then they spun the tires on the wheels, the problem tires, and they rebalanced it, and they did a road force test and all the stuff, and they wouldn't tell me that the tires needed replaced, because they were able to get two of the tires are fine, 2 of them have this issue, and they were able to get the tires down to a road force rating or whatever of 35. Their tolerance is 0 to 35, which means they wouldn't say that the tires needed replaced. So take it back, still vibrating, still not, it's not okay to me. So picked up the hub-centric rings. It definitely helped, but it definitely didn't solve it. So at this point, I messaged Trail Built Off-Road, which is who I bought the tires from. I've never ordered tires online before, but I wanted the 6-ply version. I wanted the lightest weight version of these tires possible, and they were one of the only people that had them in stock at the time. So I just bought them from them. They showed up the next day. It was a very wonderful experience. But I messaged them. I'm like, hey, I've got issues with these tires. We have got to replace 2 of these because they're not good enough. And they're like, well, you have to get some documentation, some paperwork saying that they need replaced. And I sent them all the paperwork that I had up until that point. Here's the history. Here's how many times I've visited the tire shop. I'm not having a good time with this. They won't tell me that the tires need replaced. And so I finally go back to Discount Tire the 4th time. This is my 4th trip to Discount Tire, and I live 30 minutes away from one. I go in there, and I just was like, guys, I know I didn't buy these tires from you, but help me out here. And I ended up talking to the manager and told them what was going on. And I was like, all I need from you guys is a piece of paper saying that you can't make these tires any better and that you would recommend replacement. And so they finally wrote me up a document like that, sent it to Trail Built Off-Road. They've initiated the warranty claim with Nitto, the Nitto Ridge grapplers. And then that's where it sits. That was a week ago. Haven't heard anything back from them. We'll see what happens. Hopefully I can get 2 of these tires replaced and not have any more issues, because if this is what these are gonna drive like, I'm gonna get rid of them and get different tires. Now, all of that said, I am really pumped on how this thing looks. Oh, and rubbing. Did we fix the rubbing issue? Now, I wouldn't say it's 100% fixed. I would say it's 99% fixed. In full lock, in reverse, on pretty uneven ground, there is still some rubbing. Now, it is fully drivable, and driving around, if we're mall crawling, it's no big deal at all. There's 0 rubbing. But I am nervous that if I get in some situations under full lock, under pretty extreme suspension articulation, there might be some problems. So I'm undecided. I'm probably just going to run these tires through their lifespan, or we'll see what happens with the vibration issue. So the wheels are a 17x9 minus 12 offset. And these tires are a 285/75 17. Now, if I would have went with a 0 offset with this lift kit, I think there would have been no issues and no rubbing whatsoever. Or if I would have went with a 285/70, or maybe even a 295/70, on these minus 12 wheels, there also probably would not have been any issues. So we'll see what happens. I'm undecided on if I'm going to stay with this setup super long term. However, and just like, the wheels are awesome. I do like the tires. They're quiet enough. Hopefully we can fix this vibration issue. And the guy at Discount Tire said they rarely have issues with ridge grapplers. So hopefully this is just a bad luck, because I love the way that it looks. And now with the level up suspension lift kit, it's the perfect stance. Any higher than this, it's not necessary to me, but it's perfect. This is the perfect stance, in my opinion, for this truck. It's exactly what I want it to look like. So hopefully we can get a couple of these issues sorted out. And stay tuned. If you like this sort of content, subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll keep you guys up to date. Lots more to come. Gonna do some other things to the truck coming up very soon. Probably gonna start mixing it up now, because I do want to put in more outdoor content, more camping content, and outdoor gear reviews. And again, I'm an avid landscape photographer. I really want to do some outdoor photography thing. I also am probably going to do some stuff on this channel eventually on automotive photography, because A lot of you guys kind of freak out over my Instagram. If you haven't followed me on Instagram, I'll put the link down below. I'll put links down below for everything on this build, so go check that out. But I'll probably do some sort of stuff like that. So if you're into that sort of thing, consider subscribing. Thank you guys for watching all the way to the end. Drop me a comment. Let me know that you made it to the end, because this was kind of a long one. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.